This is a YouTube video, and it's a record-breaking one. The fastest non-music video on YouTube to reach 100 million views. And it catapulted this creator into earning the highest number of new subscribers in one day, 1.4 million. Now, I want to get a feel for who in this room is familiar with this creator. So if you recognize who this is, can you raise your hand? Okay, a lot of you. And we'll dive into who this is in a little bit. There's 25 minutes of content in this video, but I want to talk about something that only takes you about 2 seconds to process. It's the thumbnail. And no, it's not this kind of thumbnail. If you know what a video thumbnail is and you know who this is, you might be among the younger in the crowd. And you might also have some idea of the scale of his viewership. Because combined, this creator's top 3 most watched YouTube videos have over 500 million views. And if you multiply the view count over the length of each video, you get 1.2 million years in watch time. So a thumbnail, or a photo representative of a video, is a way for viewers to organize and keep track of media without actually watching the entire video. It's kind of like a book cover. If you've ever walked through a bookstore, you know that each book is vying for your attention. Bright colors, fonts, and designs try to catch your eye everywhere you look. And thumbnails work in much the same way. They're designed to get your attention and make you click. These 3 videos belong to one of the most popular YouTubers of all time, Mr. Beast. And Jimmy Donaldson, the man behind this channel, revealed that not only does he sometimes design the thumbnail before even filming the video, but he's willing to pay up to $10,000 for a single thumbnail design. So why is this one photo so high value? Think about it this way. A well-written book or a well-made video isn't actually worth anything if somebody doesn't sit down and read it. I'm a graduate student at the University of Southern California, and I work with students in journalism to develop eye-catching thumbnails. And there are a couple of design features that I've noticed that we find ourselves particularly drawn to. The first, and probably most important, is to look into the eyes of another human being. That's why you often see faces so big and expressive in a lot of thumbnails. We're social creatures, so we're drawn to the humanity. Second, the text has got to be chosen selectively. Less is more, and the font has to be bold and bright. And you'll also often see the text hanging out over on the left side of the thumbnail, and that's because the time code or the length of the video is often on the lower right. And finally, we see a technique called the information or knowledge gap, where the viewer is left with a question in their minds. What is going on here? And the urge to answer that question is going to make someone click. The thumbnail and the title are also a tandem team. They shouldn't say the same thing. Rather, they fill in the gaps where the other is lacking. And this Vsauce thumbnail is a really great example of that. So these are all interesting tidbits, and you'll probably notice them now as you look at the media landscape around you. But I want to go broader here. Why should we care about thumbnails from a psychological and a business perspective? And what do they say about the world around us as it is now? That world is really different from that of your parents and your teachers, and even the world I entered when I graduated high school 5 years ago. And this examination of one singular aspect of digital media, thumbnails, it tells a story of continuing expansion in the industries of tech and media. So I want to get another feel for this room, so let's do another poll. If you have ever considered content creation as a career, or if you ever made a YouTube video, can you please raise your hand? Okay, some of you. And this is interesting because thumbnails don't affect just creators. We're all consumers of some kind. You don't just see thumbnails on YouTube. Thumbnails are scattered all throughout the digital world. And they're important because they set off a psychological decision-making process that happens in a fraction of a second. You see video thumbnails when you're browsing through the news in the morning, or when you're finding a new recipe to cook for lunch, or even when you're selecting a show to watch at the end of a long day. And we spend so much of our time on entertainment that companies like Netflix pour an immense amount of research into thumbnails. According to internal studies at Netflix, thumbnails are really important. They're the focus of 82% of browsing time. And on average, viewers only spend about 1.8 seconds considering each title before moving on to the next. So nailing that design is really important. And there's something interesting Netflix does to optimize that. So when Netflix first started, it would receive a photo representative of each title from the studio partner. Sometimes these photos were designed to be displayed on big billboards, or sometimes just a rectangular DVD case that can fit in your hand. But not only do these photos not always suit the small size of the thumbnail, but they were generic. Everyone saw the same thing. And product developers at Netflix realized that just like people like to watch different shows, they also have different reasons for clicking on the same title. So in 2015, Netflix started to create a bunch of thumbnails for each show that emphasize different aspects. Sometimes that's the genre or an actor that's trending online. But of course, you only see the one thumbnail that YouTube thinks you are most likely to click in that moment based on your viewing history. And it can change from day to day. Take a look at these two illustrations of Stranger Things thumbnails. The one on the left is more of a coming-of-age teen drama, and the one on the right is more of an apocalyptic thriller. And you can try this at home. You can log into your Netflix account and see what kinds of shows Netflix thinks you want to watch. And you might have noticed changing thumbnails before on Netflix because sometimes it's annoying. It can make returning to familiar content a little bit harder when thumbnails, which remember were intended to make it easier for us to identify media, are constantly changing. But to Netflix, the intention behind this is to get you browsing less, clicking on content faster, and watching longer, and hopefully renewing your Netflix subscription. But there's nuances to this. Thumbnails can't be misleading. And in 2018, Netflix faced some controversy about this. People of similar races, genders, and ethnicities tend to have similar viewing patterns. So even though you don't report those demographics directly to Netflix, they can make an educated guess based on what you watch. So it tried showing people actors in thumbnails that had the same assumed ethnicity of the viewer. And the reasoning behind this is pretty innocuous. One spokesperson from Netflix told Wired magazine that personalizing thumbnails, quote, help members cut down on browsing time and more quickly find stories they wanted to watch, end quote. But this also sometimes made shows on Netflix appear more diverse than they actually were. And it made some people feel racially profiled by the algorithm. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, this is a whole lot of attention to pay and meaning to assign to thumbnails. And you might be sick of hearing the word thumbnail. But it's important to note that we're dealing with a massive scale. There are over 220 million subscribers to Netflix, and they come across billions of thumbnails every day. And Mr. Beast on YouTube is due to hit 100 million subscribers in just this year. So let's return to his top 3 videos. If tweaking a thumbnail results in just a 1% increase in viewership, that's 12,000 more years in watch time. And that can translate into millions of dollars. So with this knowledge, his $10,000 investment might come into perspective here a little bit. If I had to guess, I would say that the kids and students in this room know a little bit more of what I'm talking about here than the adults. And when I first mentioned thumbnails, you thought of a fingernail instead of a video, I found that to be a pretty good indicator for age, or at least that's what I found with my dad. So, as a young person of society, you have more power and knowledge than you realize. I grew up here in the Pacific Northwest, and in high school, I loved working with computers and technology. And growing up here, we're surrounded by that industry. But I also loved being creative. I remember turning every homework assignment I could into a video project. But thumbnails, I didn't know what those were, and it wasn't even on my radar. It wasn't as big back then as it is now. For many creators at that time, it was more of an afterthought than a focus. But now people have full-time careers making thumbnails, and many of your favorite creators have full-time, multi-person teams dedicated to the craft. The fields of tech and media are undergoing a growth spurt. It was only 15 years ago that YouTube first began splitting ad revenue with creators, and this allowed people to make money off of content they posted online. And soon other companies like Snapchat and TikTok did the same. And now the creator economy, or the exchange of money between brands and influencers and audiences, is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Whenever a field expands so rapidly, little pockets of specialization pop up. And sometimes decisions come down to an expert. It can make a really big difference. So as I explored this, I found a niche that I could specialize in. Outside of school, I'm a video editor, freelance video editor for content creators. I take the raw footage and I transform it through fast-paced editing into something that's consumable and entertaining. And then using techniques I mentioned earlier, I make a thumbnail that somebody's going to want to click on. And my videos and the thumbnails that I've made have received combined millions of views. It's important to talk about thumbnails because we scroll past dozens, if not hundreds of thumbnails every day, especially those of us that grew up with the internet in the palm of our hand. And over these past couple of years, we've gone through an incredible period of history. We've spent more time online than ever before. So as a consumer, just knowing what media is intended to do, there's power in just the awareness of that. And it'll help you make more informed choices about what to consume and how your own psychology might be manipulated to do so. The knowledge gap between kids and adults is generally large. And that's okay, because that's how school works, but don't be discouraged by the fact that adults aren't talking about what interests you and what you know is big and important. And if you're stressed out, you don't know what to do after school or when you get older, that's okay, because the career for you might just not exist yet, much like the career of a thumbnail designer didn't exist a few years ago. And it doesn't matter what career field you're considering, you could be the engineer that codes a new thumbnail selection algorithm. And now you know how important that is. But for those of you who are interested in content creation, whatever that means to you, this field is ripe for innovation. And what an opportunity we have to shape it.